Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us on the Activate and Illuminate podcast with Mel. I'm your host, Mel. Together, we're going to be diving into some stories of ordinary people doing a little bit of extraordinary things. People who've maybe pushed their bodies, their mindsets, or maybe society's paradigms. So you're going to find yourself maybe wanting to laugh, cry, or even be inspired. We would invite you to share, like, and subscribe, to sign up for our newsletter as well on activateandilluminate.com. Now, just keep in mind that this information that you are going to hear is informational and educational for entertainment purposes only. This does not constitute professional advice of any kind. The views expressed are those of myself and guests only. Listeners are encouraged to seek professional and legal advice regarding their own situations. So, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time, and thanks again for being here. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. So if you have ever been in a situation where you maybe craved adventure, but you didn't know if you had it in you, or you had a big dream and you were scared to start on it, we're going to have a conversation right away here with one of my favorite people, my Uncle Ted, who did such an amazing epic adventure when he was young that I wanted to bring it to you guys as an example of people doing things and just making them happen, and an adventure that I don't know if too many people today would have the chutzpah to do. So Ted, we're gonna get into your adventure, but maybe just give us the 100-foot overview of what that adventure entailed and what it looked like, and then we'll go into some details.
Okay. Well, thank you, Melanie. Great to be with you. Yeah, so back in 1973, I graduated from university, and I had a friend that had joined me in Gauge Towers at university, and we knew each other for a few months, but hit it off really well. His name was David Smith, and he was going off with QSO. And I went to work for the summer, and he was supposed to go to Tanzania, but ended up getting sent to Papua New Guinea, in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and was looking after their silk industry there. And so at first I didn't even know where Papua New Guinea was. I was looking down, in Africa somewhere. Finally found that I was over by Australia. And I thought, oh, that would be a good place to go. That's out of the way. I'll have something different to see than just going to Europe. And so I ended up, in January of 74, I ended up flying from, I left Salmon Arm, British Columbia, and flew to Sydney, Australia, hitchhiked up the east coast of Australia to Cairns, and then flew to Mount Hagen, Port Moresby and Mount Hagen, and joined them there for 4.5 months up in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And then I left and went back down to Australia, hitchhiked again down to Tennant Creek, or out to Tennant Creek and down Ayers Rock and down through the center, and then worked for a few months in Sydney, then trotted down to Tasmania and did a bunch of hiking around Tasmania, and ended up falling off Mount Ossa, and then I ended up again going to New Zealand and doing a bunch of hiking around there. Probably hiked about 450 miles around the islands and just enjoying myself there. And while I was in New Zealand, I got a letter from another QSO friend that was up in Mount Hagen that told me that David had bought a yacht, and I had written him right after that, and I thought that he had invited me to help him sail this yacht back home. But he reminded me just a few years ago, he says, "No, Ted, I did not invite you. You wrote me and told me that you were coming back here to help me sail this home." And I've been worrying about it ever since, because I'd never sailed before in my life. This was something brand new to me, and he had sailed around Vancouver. He had been in one Swiftsure, so that's out to Cape Flattery and back from Victoria, but he hadn't done any open water sailing. So this was a major trip. It's about 13,000 kilometers from Papua New Guinea to Victoria. And so it was quite an undertaking, but that's I thought I was going on a 6-month vacation, and it took 2.5 years for me to get home. So you can tell I really didn't have it all planned out real well, but I was just going and enjoying myself in the process. And it was actually when I was sailing, or when I was in the plane heading to Australia, the first time I was looking down at all this water. We seemed to be flying for hours and hours, and all you saw was endless water. And at the time, I thought, man, how could anybody, those early sailors, how'd they even have enough guts to get up and sail and find some little island in places, And so, but I thought back to my dad, who was in the Navy, and he'd always wanted to build a sailboat. He says, man, that'd be really great if I could sail home. But I had no sailboat and really didn't think I have any chance of that. So I had bought a return ticket, airplane ticket. So I was prepared to fly. But I guess I had asked David if I could return and help him sail home. And he told me, well, you got to stay there for a few months and work. And I'll have to send you lists of equipment and gear and rigging stuff that we're going to need to fix up the boat before we sail home. And so I ended up getting a job with Ruapeo Alpine Lifts on the North Island, and when Mount Ruapeo erupted and wiped out some of the ski lifts. So got a job fixing that and then working on the ski lifts until I went back to Papua New Guinea with some of the gear. So that's sort of the 2.5 years in about 5.5 minutes.
So this, once you knew you were sailing back and that you've never sailed before, what kind of boat did he buy? Like, was it completely, were you having to like retrofit it and actually do it? Was it like a decent boat? First of all, how long was it?
20 feet, 6 inches. So about 6.1 meters.
20 feet long.
20 feet. Yeah. In fact, that's a picture of it on the wall or behind me. But that is a replica of Trekka, which was the smallest sailboat to circumnavigate. John Guswell had single-handedly taken that around the world. He actually built it in Victoria, the original boat, not this one, but a sister ship to this one, the Trekka. Between 1954 and 59, he had sailed it from Victoria around the world and come back. And so he had it specifically designed by Lawrence Giles in England, an ocean sailing boat. But, you can fit 2 people on it, but you can't stand up inside it. You can either sit up or lie down in that boat, but there's not a lot of headroom. But a great little yawl, Tiki was her name, and we just had a blast sailing her home.
So what was your biggest fear before setting sail? And did it ever happen?
Probably there were other people that were more in more fear and scared than I was, but because ignorance is bliss, But I really wasn't worried about not getting home. My biggest worry was possibly having to show up at his mother's place and explain to her why I had made it, but he hadn't. My biggest fear was that he might get blown overboard or lose him overboard, and then having to face his mom and just say, "Oh yeah, we were good friends. Sorry, but he didn't make it." And that was the fear. And actually, David did get blown off the boat once, and I had to haul him back on. So it was a reality when you're 2,000 miles from land, and somebody goes overboard. You start looking at it and say, "Man, if this had happened at night, or if this had happened, when we were sailing along instead of being come up into the wind, you just could lose somebody so easily out there and never see them again." And we were sailing with no motor. Okay. I had to buy a sextant and tables. We had to do celestial navigation. Neither one of us had done celestial navigation before, but that became my job to learn it and to do all the navigating and mapping. And so that was interesting. We had no lights. We had no two-way communication, radio communication, in case of emergency. We had a radio that we could get time signals for so we could do our celestial navigation. But back then, there was no GPS, none of this. And we didn't have enough space to have batteries or anything that would give us like a ham radio or anything to communicate. Yeah, there was no communication, and we had a flashlight we could shine on the sails, and that was about it. if we had to warn somebody. I did build a radar reflector and put it on top of the mizzen mast so that big ships would see us on the radar if they're coming by. There were actually 2 ships that did change course. We could see their wake and all, and see that they had turned and come to visit us. But it's kind of interesting, to see I'm sure looking down middle of the North Pacific and not seeing anybody on deck and this little boat just sailing
Bobbing along.
the water.
Oh my! So, were you ever scared for your life?
Well, there was, I guess, when the waves got higher than the mast at one time, and that started to get exciting. And we woke up broadside in this. So we'd come up and hove to in the wind, but the wind was strong enough that it just blew us sideways, and the water was dumping over the boat. The waves were crashing over the boat, but we felt quite snug down inside until David stuck his head out. He screamed, "We gotta get out of here!" And so we had to go and grab the tiller, and we put up a storm jib. That was the only thing up. They just strung between the stay in the mainmast and just a handkerchief basically to try and keep it downwind. And we were surfing down these waves, and it was just picking us up and throwing us down these waves. And the log went up to 15 knots, and it went off the end of it. So I don't know how fast we were actually going, but it was more exhilarating than going, 80 miles an hour in a speedboat. Just as it was, that one sort of had our heart in our mouth for the first 12 hours or so, and then you start looking for a bigger wave. This thing floats, it's just like a little cork. And so we were surfing down these waves and just having a blast, but we weren't going in the right direction. At that point, we're just going whichever way the wind was blowing. So that was exciting.
This episode brought to you by protandemcanada.lifevantage.com. What if you could turn on your body to work like it was supposed to? What if you could have it remember how to handle toxins, stress, and the environment like it used to when you were young? What if it worked for your pets too? What if this is not about supplementing something that is missing, but activating something that has gone dormant? About actually turning on your body to make these things again. Learn how to activate your body now. Check us out, protandemcanada.lifevantage.com.
How did you prepare enough food? If you didn't have space, what did you eat?
I still have the list of all the food that we had stored in there. I was in charge of food stores and rationing everything out. Our main concern was water. From Pohnpei, we had left Pohnpei with 65 gallons of water, and we used only 39 of that in the 62 days that between Pohnpei and Victoria. Total sailing time in that of the journey was 90 days of sailing, but we'd gone from Madang to Rabaul and Rabaul to Pohnpei, and then it was Pohnpei to Victoria. So, and that 62 days without seeing land was a long stretch, and we were closer to the Aleutians than to Midway Island or any of the the Hawaiian chain. But it was pretty exhilarating and nice to be on this side of the trip and be able to look back and have a few stories to tell. But it was there's not much space on the deck of that boat, and especially when you have a rubber dinghy folded in half and half inflated and strapped on there as your emergency boat. Of course, and the dinghy was more than half as long as the whole boat. So it was
Do you think
just a tiny little boat.
Wow. Do you think he would have made it on his own?
He could have. David, he probably would have been more cautious, I say, if on his own with the trip that we had. I'm sure David is a great entrepreneur and adventurer, and he just was very competent with tools, and as I say, he was the actual sailor, and I mean, we took 6-hour watches, so we'd be responsible for the sailing each 6 hours and keeping track of stuff. Did the majority of the cooking and the anything that you had to be looking down for in terms of mapping and things like that. David was more likely to get seasick than I was. So
Okay.
we were both seasick for the first 3 days leaving Pohnpei, beating into the Northeast Trades. But he continued to get sick, which was not that pleasant for him. So if he was out on deck, it was all right. But if he was looking down or trying to read or things like that, yeah, he got sick. But once we got into calmer or easier winds and waves for much of the sailing, beating into the Northeast Trades, I think, for about 10 days straight without changing sails. We were just going, and that little boat just plugged along, and it was great. It was interesting.
Sorry to interrupt there. What strengths do you think that you came out of that with, that you discovered that you maybe didn't know you had?
Well, that David, people would ask us when we got back. They would say, "Well, you guys were friends when you left, but were you friends when you got home? Because that's a tiny space to be in." But we never had a crossword with each other the whole trip. I mean, there were
Wow.
times when you weren't in the greatest of moods, one of you, but we just basically let each other have the space we needed. And one of my most frustrating times was actually when I was trying to cook a meal, and I think I scraped the food off of the floor and the ceiling and the walls about 4 times before, because we were in some pretty rough weather, and that was likely the most frustrating time I had. But we both were just pretty at ease with just jury rigging or fixing things, and if it needed it. And so whether it was, stitching sails or fixing something that is broken, we were pretty comfortable fixing things. And so as I say, ignorance is bliss. It takes about the first week to get comfortable and into sort of a routine of sailing. And once you get into that routine, you making the sights, getting sights in the morning and at lunchtime and in the afternoon, so you could get a fix. Doing the celestial navigation was sort of my main job, and plotting. We get the heading for the shortest route home, a Great Circle route, and so that was my job. And so you'd get into that routine. Of course, the weather didn't always oblige us, because if you can't see the sun, that's pretty hard to take a sunset. You take ones of stars or the moon. But it was there. I think we went for about once. I think we went for about 3 days without getting a sight. The weather was so bad, but that time we were going in a southeast direction instead of a northeast. But so our trip wasn't necessarily a completely smooth line.
Like, you'd never even navigated like that before. I mean, how did you even know you were doing it right?
I didn't. the first time that I took a sight, we were in Madang, Papua New Guinea, and I'd been out we'd gone out on the water a bit, and I had us plotted and put us somewhere inland, up in some swamp. Well, I better improve on this before we actually go sailing, But it was, but there was a fellow that had been a navigator, basically in the Air Force, in the U.S. Air Force. It was on a boat, so he helped me somewhat. Just showed me what was critical and what you needed to do, and so that was fun. That was handy. Every one of that we had sort of left in Papua New Guinea, people that had sailed, and they begged us not to go. They thought we were going to kill ourselves. Both David and I had lost our fathers when we were younger, and so we had our moms at home. But my mother sort of got out a transverse Mercator map and put a ruler on Papua New Guinea and one on Vancouver or Victoria and drew a line and said, "Oh, he'll be going right through Hawaii." So, no idea what sailing is like. So, but the less they knew, the better, right? We just said if we don't show up in 90, from Ponape, I said, we figure we're going to do it in about 65 days. And if it takes, so you can start worrying about us after 3 months. But but there's no way that we could have got a hold of anybody anyway to warn them that there was something wrong. So
No. So do you think that journey has influenced your decisions since?
Well, yeah, I guess it's given me confidence in being able to deal with things that you may not have planned on beforehand and just to work through it. It's probably gave me a little more patience. And because, when you're sitting there and you're becalmed, I mean, you can talk about the storm, but being becalmed and just slapping away, having everything is not much fun either. And at least if you've got waves, you got something to keep you busy. And when you're becalmed, you're just flopping around. So it's good for suntanning, I guess. But
what would you say was the biggest impact of it for you?
Well, I had an experience that I hadn't planned on, that really, and it wasn't about the sailing. It was actually a spiritual experience. And when I was in New Zealand, my sister had sent me a book and asked if I would read it. And I was not really a religious type or that. And I threw it in the bottom of my pack and didn't pay any attention to it. And, but she was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And well, a lot of people know us as Mormons, but I wasn't one of the at the time. But when we were about halfway or a third of the way from Ponape to Victoria, just about crossing the international date line in the North Pacific, that actually I started reading the book of Mormon. She had sent it to me and highlighted some passages, and she said, just read it and think about it and pray about it. And I really wasn't going to pray about it because I figured that would just come on to read the book. And so but I had started basically that evening, I think after David went overboard. And I just sort of read this overview a bit and it kind of intrigued me. But so the next day I started reading it from cover and read it from cover to cover in about a week. So I was reading on the second day that I was reading, I had this sensation, the feeling in my chest, and I was bawling my eyes out and I couldn't read the page. I was really moved by it all. Felt a little self-conscious because it's kind of hard to hide on a 20-foot boat, Yeah, the sailor image with it, I guess, dissipating rapidly. But anyway, but I didn't pray about it. That was actually on the second day that I got probably a third of the way through it, and I had that experience. And then the next day, I was about halfway through the book, and I can remember just looking up and saying, God, if you're telling me this book is true, I said, let me feel that same feeling. Or I said, if that feeling that you gave me yesterday was telling me that this book is true, I said, let me feel it again. Bam, and hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew at that point that I felt it was true, and that I would join the church when I got home. And yet that's what I felt inside. But when David asked me if I was going to join the church, I lied. I told him no. I think just socially, I wasn't ready to make that commitment. I did, but that has impacted my life because I have been active in the church ever since then, and it has given me principles to live by, and I've felt the Lord's hand in my life over and over, and I'm so grateful for that. Yet that was not anything that we had planned on doing, or that had been one of the outcomes that I'd been looking for when I started the journey. But it has been a major part of my life, and I'm grateful for that. But I still get teary when I think of what it was. in that experience. I think that having a friend that would be willing to risk his life, and he didn't invite me, but he didn't say no. So, but he, to let me go with him, and for somebody that had never sailed in his life, and to spend basically 6 months living on that boat when the whole time we were in Madang and Rabaul, we lived in that boat. So we cooked and ate meals and everything. A gimbal, 2-burner stove, coal oil stove, and so. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of variety in terms of meals, but just packing it in, and it was underneath the bunks. We filled uh, uh, the space under our bunks. That was solid. We had food in every nook and cranny, but we had very limited space, and yet enough that I think we could have survived for 3 months. But we had got through most of the better food in the first 2 months. But
do you think that spiritual experience was part of why you made it back?
Well, I know that we were very fortunate because you are at the mercy of the wind and the waves, and fire, wind, and waves, on water, those basic elements of life. But any one of those that is out of control or is pretty forceful. And so I feel that it was less dangerous, or we were fortunate that we had some storms, but I wasn't cast adrift or anything and pitch pulled, or like there's a lot of people that have had a lot worse experiences on the water than we did, and lost their lives. But so yes, it was a gamble, but I feel that well, I just about lost my life, I'd say about 10 times on that 2.5-year trip. So I had a number of experiences that could have been very serious. So my wife would still say that really that safety was not one of my highest things on my list. And so I acknowledge that, but I feel that I have been watched over, that when I was in Tasmania and I was hanging upside down over a cliff, I was hanging by my right leg in a crevice. And, I was trying to get down off this pinnacle and got to a spot where I couldn't get down, and I ended up having to try and let myself down over this rock and ledge, and ended up hanging by one hand and then having to let go, and then hanging with my head in the snow, and my leg was caught in the crevice, and I could still be hanging there. But I had to try and do some push-ups, headstand type push-ups, but it was just snow. And I tried first time, I pulled some snow in and pushed, and all I did was push snow. Did it again, and I got more, and all I did was push snow. And the third time I was able to just get enough weight off of my leg that I could flip it out. But that was probably one of the times, again, that I felt that somebody was watching over me. That, again, I was at the mercy of a much greater power, and grateful for the experiences that I've had that have, again, looking back, you can see the dots line up a lot more. When you're in it, and looking forward, you got no idea. But I do give the Lord credit for many of the experiences I've had of surviving them. But it's something that a lot of people don't do. It was, and it wasn't that I wanted to do it to be better than anyone else or do something. It was just, I thought that really I was doing it for my dad. And I felt that if he had been there, that's something he would have liked to have done, is to sail. Well, he tried to build a sailboat he tried to build a boat in our basement. And he did a little build one, but then we had to cut out the wall and make a stairway down into the basement so we could get the boat out. It was too big to get out of the basement. So it was interesting. Yeah. it was something that was new to me, definitely. And yet it was major part of my life that is, I think, put me on a path that is one that I have enjoyed and felt grateful for.
What would you say to a young person right now stepping out, wondering whether they should do something bold?
I think that people should try a lot of things and push themselves. And yes, probably getting a little bit more training or background and experience before you set off, but really learning how to care for yourself and being self-reliant, basically being able to make do and to find yourself in situations that you need to work through, I think are healthy and are good. And yes, there's all kinds of danger and all kinds of things that could happen, but there's lots of things that could happen sitting at home, you know? So I think that it was, I really hadn't hiked that much before I went to Papua New Guinea. And I know within 2 weeks of getting there, we had climbed Mount Gilloway, which is a 14,000-foot mountain. And so I had some experiences there too. But it just, I think, pushing yourself and for me, it was the people I met. I think that was the most important piece. It wasn't so much of going somewhere exotic. There's beautiful stuff all around the world. Anywhere you go, there is beauty. Out in the middle of the the Australian desert there, it was just the bird life, the colors and the things just were amazing. And so I think if we can appreciate, nature and what's been provided and what's around us, we'll have a, a better outlook on life and an appreciation of life. As Kath and I often say, it's not so much, amazing that we die or could kill ourselves. It's amazing that we can actually just live, just breathing. Like the reality and the mechanics of a body, of how that all interacts and functions is more of a miracle than, me hanging off a cliff and coming back or sailing a boat. And so I think if we really look at what we've been given and what we got, and appreciate it, then we'll be better off for it.
You have such a good outlook on life and such a positive viewpoint. When you were out on the ocean, did you ever feel like the ocean spoke to you?
Well, the ocean, when you're out there, it's always changing and yet always the same. Like you can see forever, right? You got the
Yeah.
horizon out there, 360 degrees. And yeah, the weather is always changed. So the sky, different clouds, different formations. And so, same old thing. You're out on the water, and yet it is changing, and it's exciting to see and feel and be a part of just that constant ebb and flow and that change. At sea, there was one night that we had a 360-degree sunset, and it was like a rainbow all the way around. And there's a blue circle directly above us, and I wish that I had a camera. We had both sold our cameras before we left. We thought we were going to buy an Nikonos underwater camera at the time, but we thought that the salt water would probably destroy our cameras if we brought them with us. And so we had sold those, and just to get enough money to sail home too. I had cashed in my plane ticket and worked for 5 months just so that we could buy the supplies we needed. And yeah, but it was well worth it. And if you're willing to eat cold oats in the morning, it was a bit of powdered milk and sometimes throw a few raisins on it. We didn't cook the oats until we got up where it was cold, because we didn't have enough fuel for the stove to cook. And there just wasn't room. Water was our most prime thing, and we used as much space as we could for water and sufficient food. But yeah, it's a good test of our ability and I guess frugality.
Just have it.
We landed in Victoria, and the customs folks, we called up the customs to come down and see us, but spent a few hours getting stuff fixed up, and the customs officer didn't show up. So I just went and climbed on a bus and got on a ferry. I didn't call my mother to tell her I was home. I thought I'd surprise her. I went and visited a few of my friends from university because I knew there was a midnight bus. And so I caught the midnight bus from Vancouver, and I got to Salmon Arm about 8:30 in the morning. And I knew my mom would be at work in the Human Resources and Welfare Office in the middle of town. And so I just walked from the bus stop to her office and walked in, and Mrs. Bennett, a friend of hers, a lady that she worked with, was there, and she said, "Peggy, Ted's here. Peggy, Ted's here." And my mother, she was filing some files. She did not turn around. She didn't bat an eye, didn't do anything. And because for the last 2.5 years, every scruffy looking fellow with a beard and a pack that came through the door, she would say the same thing. She would kid her that it was me, right? And so when it was me, my mother wasn't going to be baited by it. But after she kept saying it, my mom turned around and it was a teary and a wonderful reunion. And she sent Mom home with me and says, "You better take this kid home and feed him. He hasn't had a meal for a long time." And so that was kind of special. And I actually kept it a secret. I went up to your house actually and surprised your mom, shocked her a little bit. And but you were playing, and I was talking to you, and your mom was out in the laundry room or something. She came in and saw this guy in there with her daughter. She was a little worried at first. Yeah. So it was, we surprised your dad and surprised my grandfather. And when I went out to see him, I, again, hadn't told him I was home yet. I just went up and walked in on, and he was in tears. He thought that he wouldn't live to see me. And so that was touching. That was a great blessing for me to be able to see him again. And to, of course, he of course gave me a rough time about being so foolish. But I guess he was proud of his grandson.
How long did he live after?
I believe that he died actually.
And what did your sister Mary think about your decision?
My sister Mary, the one who sent me the book.
Yeah.
Well, she had told me, because I had always kept like this 6-month trip that I was going to take. That took 2.5 years. I kept postponing my return home, and she said, "Well, I'm going on a mission for the church," and she did end up going to Mexico as a nurse. She had trained as a nurse, and she went down there for 18 months. But she says, "At the rate you're going," she says, "I'll be home before you." So I didn't tell her that I'd read the book or how I felt or anything. Because she was actually leaving the airport for Mexico the day I arrived. And not from home, but from the missionary training center in Salt Lake. And so she had already gone out to the airport. And usually in those days, you got to call home twice sort of a year, Mother's Day and Christmas. And so she hadn't called her and then hadn't been in touch with her. And then I think, I guess it was Thanksgiving, she got to call. And she called and she asked if I'd read the book of Mormon. And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, what did you think of it?" And I said, "Oh, it was okay." But because I didn't want my mother I'd been at home for 6 months, and I had gone to church with her as sort of sorry, here I am leaning over here because I'm looking around this thing. I apologize.
That's okay.
Now I gone blank. anyway, we were just talking about Mary being in Mexico and asking me if I'd read this book, and I'd been interested. I wanted to join the church, and yet I didn't want anybody to know about it because I figured there'd be pressure on me or whatever. And it was probably about 5-6 months after I got home that I actually got up enough nerve to say that I would join. And I wouldn't let the missionaries teach me because I already knew the book was true. But I didn't want, other people knowing that that's what I had intent to do. So in November, I got home in June, and in November I joined the church.
Okay.
It's been about, it was 76 then. It's 26 now, so it's 50 years ago. Well, we'll be in November of this year. It'll be 50 years, and I am grateful that that happened and that I'm still involved, and I'm grateful for the things that I've been able to do and the things I've learned and people I've been able to connect with, and just grateful for the Savior, grateful for Jesus Christ and for his role in my life. And so that has been the most constant and most important thing to me in my life. And so it's been a huge blessing. But thanks for asking.
Well, I love hearing this story, Ted.
Well,
I love hearing this story. And is there anything else that you'd like to share?
just to encourage people, the world is there. And I don't think it's so much about trying to go to every place in the world or as many places. I did that country and did that one. It's again, the people that you meet along the way and the relationships that you're able to generate and just to serve other people, to help them, to wherever you are. You can, but it's great. We've had opportunity to get to know um, uh, the Mexican people. We've spent some time down there, but just to, whether they're your own culture or another culture, it's great to get some perspective and realize that, there's a lot more to this world than what's in your backyard. So I think looking for the good, looking for the positives, and try and provide opportunities for the positives to happen in people's lives are really important.
Well, I consider it an honor to have been able to record this conversation with you and just to give people a glimpse into, what was an incredible risk, an incredible adventure. But what I know of you is that the adventure and the risk is what makes your life worth living. And I can't hear this story and in the meantime think about some of the things that maybe I could step out a little bit more and be a little bit even in it, it doesn't necessarily have to be about sailing around the world. It can be a little bit more adventurous in your own backyard.
Yeah.
And anyways, thank you for your perspective and just your wisdom
Well,
and your courage.
thank you. Yeah, and all we have to do is step out on the street. There's a lot of people that we may not be comfortable with, and just with where they're at in life, and but treating them as a human, and just reaching out to people. It's amazing what it does to your heart as you just do things that are a little bit more uncomfortable than what you might be used to. So thank you, Mel. It's been great. It's been a while since that trip, but it's been a good life, and it is just great to see. I'd say you have stepped out of your comfort zone, and even just doing what you're doing now, it's great. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ted, and for your legacy. All right, we'll end there.
Okay. Bye.